Mark Robinson, the Senior VP of Business and Legal.
Larry Mistel, Primary Wave.
Colleen Ice, the COO of The Orchard. Welcome to our last class this semester. Hope those of you who were here for previous classes feel like you got some interesting information, enlightenment, etc., which is the goal of this series of seminars. Tonight, as Dr. Marconi said, we're privileged to have Lisa with me. Lisa is somebody I've twisted her arm for on several occasions to come out here. She's got some interesting stories, going back to when she started, but her relevance today is really something to all of you to absorb, watch, and the stuff on the screen will elaborate some of the things she's involved with. But yes, Lisa's involved with Cyndi Lauper and has been managing her for quite some time. It's not the only thing. She's not a one-trick pony by any stretch of the imagination. I asked Lisa here because I think she has an interesting story, how she got started in the business, and she'll be able to share with you some of the ups and downs and some of the challenges. And I think she has a definitely unique perspective, different than some of the other women who've been here this semester, on the Me Too moment and how things are going and how they've been and where they're going. So as I always like to do, I always ask our guests, so other than me driving you here tonight, how did you get here? How did you start?
I grew up in New Jersey, actually, not far from here. One of my jobs when I was in junior high and high school is I worked at a pool company. And I was always a crazy, crazy music fan. You know, in those days we had, you had a family television, and there wasn't TV 24/7. You listened to music. That's what the kids did. I grew up with a huge family, 6 brothers and sisters, and music was a big part of what we did for fun. So I got a job at a pool company, and stocking shelves and all that stuff. And a lot of the people that came in were music industry people, because it was like Fort Lee and Englewood and Teaneck, right by the George Washington Bridge. And one of the guys that came into the store was a guy called Johnny Padell. And Johnny Padell is a booking legend. He was in his 20s then, probably late 20s, and he was booking Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and all these people. And his little girl would come into the store and I'd play with her for like hours. So one night he calls me and says, "Hey, I'm having a party. You're really good with kids. Can you come to my house and babysit all the kids? It's going to be an afternoon barbecue." And I'm like, "Absolutely." He's like, "I'll pay you $50. I was making, I think, $5 an hour, working at Saturdays at this store. So I'm great. So my old man brings me to this house, and it's a mansion, And I go to the party, and there's, 2 or 3 kids, and as the day goes on, there's more kids. There's probably 5 kids. And Debbie Harry's there, and Tom Petty's there, and Leon Redbone, and all these incredible artists, and girls walking around topless, and people smoking pot and giving me beers, and I'm like, what is this? But I know I want in, So all day long, people are like giving me $20 and $30, and my father picks me up, and I have like $400 or $500, and like my father didn't make that in a week. And I get in the car, and my father's like, "What did you do today?" And I'm like, and he's like, "I don't know what they do, but you better find out how to get in, So, Johnny became this, and I was just listening to music all day, and people were asking me about music, and Johnny called me came to the store the following week, and he said, "You were so great with all those people and all that kind of," and everyone was talking about was how in tuned you were to music, and people were playing me records and doing like, "Oh, come listen to this record," and so there was this magical day where I was like, I don't know what that is, but I know I want in. So, Johnny and I stayed in touch, and I got a lot of advice that day, and someone suggested I get a job at a radio station when I went to college, and basically I had this one afternoon, I got this like incredible roadmap of how I could get in, because I just loved the music so much, and I was like, you can make money, and that can be your life. So, I got the job at the radio station at this little tiny college I went to called Siena College. I wound up, becoming one of the event planners. I booked 10,000 Maniacs who were in college at the same time nearby. I became their tour manager one summer after I booked them in this college gig. And that led me later to when I was leaving school, I had this resume. I worked at the radio station at my college, and which was a Catholic college, and I had to play like Christian music half the day, and I tour managed 10,000 Maniacs, and that led me to getting a gig at Elektra Records in 1985 when I graduated college. So it was just kind of this crazy happy accident.
Well, the Maniacs were signed to Elektra.
And so the Maniacs got signed to Elektra around the same time. I think Natalie's a year older than I am, and so her manager, when told me that this gig was opening up for a new publicist, and I didn't even know, I was an English major and thought I was gonna go to law. I thought my way into the music business was I was gonna become like an attorney. And this gig came again. I found out about this job. I applied for it. I got a phone call like, "Can you be here June 19th?" I was graduating June 17th, and I was like, "Yeah," and got this gig and worked at Elektra Records for 5 years. In the press department.
Who were some of the artists that you worked with?
Metallica, Teddy Pendergrass. The first day of my job, I was given Teddy Pendergrass, who I don't know if you guys know who Teddy is, and I was his publicist to the day he died, 30-something years. I did Simply Red, The Cure, Bjork, Sugar Cubes, who became Bjork, Metallica, Motley Crue. Elektra was just like this incredible label, and it was a really tiny label, and there were 60 of us, and they would just give me records, and like, "Oh, get this band on TV, and get this band in a magazine," and I didn't even know what the hell I was doing, but my boss gave me a Rolodex, and I'm like, I have Metallica, so it wasn't like they weren't calling me back, So I was very successful just by accident again, and I worked really, really hard, and I was the first person there, and because I could not believe my luck, and I was the last person to leave every night, and I just lived it, and I went to I just loved it, and I think the bosses saw that I was so passionate, and I made sure I was the best at what I could be, and worked my ass off, and it paid off.
So you were there, about 4 years? I
worked there 5 years, and then from there I went to Geffen Records, and I had, Nirvana, incredible. It was during the kind of hair band days of the 80s, so there was a lot of like White Snake and that kind of stuff too. But they also had this incredible roster, and again, I just worked with these incredible X and just a lot of great bands. And again, you're as good as the band you represent, right? So I just always had this wealth of incredible artists, and it made what I did easy. It's not as much fun as it was back in those days, because back in those days it was about how good the music was. It wasn't about like what your social media is, or if you have 6 million followers, no one cared. Like if you called Rolling Stone magazine and said, "Oh, they sold this many records this week," they didn't want to talk to you. They wanted to talk about the music. And so you had to know the record you were pitching them backwards and forwards, but you needed to know about every record that you were competing with to get into the magazine. So if you're trying to get whatever X in, you had to know every other punk band that was putting records out and why they should write about X and not the other band. So I spent every moment of every day listening to other people's records. So if the Rolling Stone magazine said, "Oh, we're going to do that band," I would say, "Well, this is why you shouldn't and why you should do mine." So I just lived it. Like literally, I got up in the morning listening to records. I went to bed at night listening to records, and I just made sure I, knew, what was happening around me.
And then I guess, I don't know if she was working at Elektra at the time, but then you rendezvoused with Sylvia Rhone?
Well, Sylvia Rhone was my first boss, because when I first got hired by Elektra, I got, at the time, they called the Black Music Department, because they were looking for, and then alternative rock was not a big genre yet. So they had to try to find somebody that could do both. And when I interviewed with Sylvia over the phone, she was asking me about records that were happening, in black radio, because that's what they called it back in 1985. And I knew that's what I did. You know, I loved R&B music, and I also liked alternative. So I kind of, and they were like, okay, we'll get this kid for 16 grand, and she could do both. You know, she could do both gigs. And then, you know, eventually I was doing tour press for the R&B acts there and for the alternative acts there initially. And then Sylvia gave me a promotion, and then my last job, label job, was I was the head of press for Sylvia Rhone's first label, where she was the head of called East West Records. You know, Sylvia today was just become the first, I think, you know, female CEO of a label today. She now runs Epic Records, which she's done for, you know, 10 years or so, but she's been given the stripes that
Epic's part
she
of
deserves.
Sony?
Yeah, and she's incredible. And she was so Johnny Padell and Sylvia Rhone were my mentors and have been in my life since I started, and it's people I go to for advice still.
And you should mention Johnny still.
So Johnny is retired now. He's in his 70s, but Johnny was at CAA and William Morris and ICM, and he you know.
It still shows up at shows.
If you look at if you know, Google Johnny Padell, he's, you know, legend.
And he's had a very interesting career, up and down. And
yeah,
he's had
you know, drug addiction, and he became kind of the guru for sobriety, for bands trying to get sober. You know, when an act was trying to get sober, they would bring Johnny, and he would do interventions. He was like the industry go-to guy, and he saved a lot of lives and careers, and still does today. Still does that today.
So you were at East West with Sylvia, and
Yeah.
then something else happens.
So I was at East West, and I always loved. The thing I didn't like about press was that it was such a, you know, it was such a narrow view of what. So all I had to do was like worry about, and it's cyclical, right? So when an artist puts a record out, you get it early, you talk about the record, and then they go off cycle, and then they're gone, you know, and it just felt like you would get not the ball started, but you would. I just didn't like being part of that. It was a beginning and an end. And it was more about the record than the long view. And the best labels, I mean, Elektra was a great label, and we always talked about when, I remember the first time the chairman at the time of the label was called Bob Krasnow. And when Kras came into the marketing meeting and put Metallica on, no one had ever heard Metallica or speed metal, and he puts this thing on. It's like ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da, and we're all like, "What is that?" You know. And it was, and you had to like. At first, it was like so foreign, and then Kras is like, "Sit down and listen, like lean back and listen," and we just sat there, and we never heard anything like it, and you know, there were people in the room going, "What the f*** is that?" And other people said, and Bob said, "Know what this is?" And someone said, "What the f*** is that?" And Krasnow said, "Know what that is? That's going to be an arena band in 20 years. They're going to be the biggest thing that rock and roll has ever seen." And they were playing in front of 30 kids in college towns at bars. And he said, "So how are we going to get them there? How are we going to? What's the next 10 years look like? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say? What's your? Come back and tell me what they're going to be doing in 5 years." And that's really how. And I was a new person in the music business, and that's how I thought it was done. So we all went in and we got together as a team and said, okay, how are we going to make them an arena band? Like, what's realistic? And we say, okay, this record, we're going to sell 60,000, and they're going to do this much touring, and they're going to be on this kind of TV show or that kind of magazine, and they'll be on the cover of Metal, Church magazine. And there was a plan, and that's how Elektra and that's what Elektra did. And it was great because that's why we had so many hit records, because there was this plan. It wasn't like, let's chase a single and see what happens. You know, Geffen Records wasn't so much that way. It wasn't like they definitely chased cycles. But growing up in the Elektra Academy, it was like that's how my brain always thought. I never thought like, you know, I always thought like long view, not, you know, how am I going to make sure I keep my job? And I was like, how do I get them? Where do I see this band in 3 years, and how do I get them there, and what's the process of getting them there? And I always just thought the managers had the coolest gigs because they got to be the quarterback. They got to see what they were doing at radio. They got to talk about marketing. They got to talk about touring. They got to kind of, with the artist obviously in the front seat, figure out how they were going to be career artists, right? Every artist wants to be a career artist. You don't want to do it temporarily or just sell enough records to build a house and then quit. Like if you're a true artist, you want to make music forever. And it only makes sense that your career goes up and down, right? You're going to have, and so how do you keep it so that there's always integrity and you don't sell out and you make good decisions and you keep it going and you keep moving forward. And I just thought that was the coolest gig. So my admiration was always for the managers. And one of the bands that I worked was a band called Simply Red, who you may not know, and they were an English band that were hugely successful here. And I was his publicist from the day his first record came out. And his managers opened up an office in New York, and they did all the Manchester, England. It was a big hot for music at that time, like Happy Mondays and just bands you probably don't know, but they were big in the early '90s. So they opened a New York office and asked me to come run it. So that's how I started managing. I started representing all their bands in New York. And at the same time, to make more money, because when you're a manager, you get paid on commission, so you can't count on money necessarily. So I left East West and I started their management company, and I also at the same time opened up a PR firm because I was doing AC/DC's press, who I did their press for 10 years. I did the Allman Brothers. I was doing, who else I was doing back then? Foreigner.
Cheap Trick.
Cheap Trick. And Anita Baker, and I worked for Natalie Merchant again. I was doing Edie Brickell and New Bohemians. I did some work with Paul Simon, and that's what I did. And at the same time, was learning how to be a manager, and I did that for about, I don't know how many years I did that. I did both for about 5 years, and I just started managing full time in maybe 2000, I guess, 1999.
And you said Simply Red was one of your first clients?
Yeah, and I had a lot of different acts over the years. I had a band called the Mooney Suzuki, who were this really cool rock band on Columbia. I had these hip-hop girls from out of Philly called the Spence Sisters. I managed Vivian Green for a long time, who's a soul singer out of Philly. Craig David, the Brand New Heavies. I worked with and all those guys too. And now today I manage 3 artists. Cyndi, who I've been managing since 2000 or 1999. Vivian Green, who's who I just mentioned. Nikki Vianna, who's a kind of Ariana Grande type on Atlantic pop artist, and a indie rock guy called Ben Hopkins, that's on Warner Brothers.
So, how did you meet with Cyndi? I mean, how did you guys?
Well,
connect?
I was Cindy's publicist in 1993 when I went indie. I was Cindy's publicist from '93 to '97. Her manager also managed AC/DC, so I was doing AC/DC's press, and his name is Steve Barnett, who's now the president of Capitol Records, and I basically did press for all of Barnett's acts. So I did Cheap Trick for him, and Foreigner, and AC/DC, and Cyndi. And so I was Cindy's publicist from '93 to '97. So years later, she's like, well, you should come be my publicist again, because we did great stuff together. And I was not doing press anymore. And I said, well, I'm not a publicist anymore, so I can't do it. She's like, no, come on. I know you're still doing Teddy's press. I'm like, yeah, but Teddy's different. But I'm not doing press anymore. And she was like, well, why don't you become my manager? And I said, because you can't be managed. Because I'm not doing that. I'm a young manager. I don't need to be fired by Cyndi Lauper again, And so she said, no, we'd be. I'm like, no, we would not be great together. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll help you, because she was unhappy with the guy who was managing her at the time. I said, but I'll take over until you find, I told her I was working with Simply Red, and I had opened up their New York office, and that I was, managing full time, and I had a couple of my own bands and stuff. And she's like, great. So, I said, well, tell me what you're looking for. And so she would say, this is the kind of manager I want. So I said, this guy's great, this woman's great. And I started, getting her meetings with other people. And I'd like, how'd it go? She's like, oh, I'd hate it. It was terrible. I couldn't stand it, So in the meantime, I'm taking the calls from the record company and the agents, and all of a sudden, 20 years later, I'm managing her. It was never something that we planned. It's just something that naturally kind of happened. But it was really good because, one of the things as a manager that's really important is honesty. Like if you like Cyndi and I are brutally honest with each other all the time, and I think because I was never worried about being fired by her because I was never working for her really. I always told her my truths and what I thought about anything, and it's what she expects from me. And I think a lot of managers have a hard time because they want to keep their gigs, because sometimes what we do is tell them things they don't want to hear, but somebody has to do it. And that's really one of the most important jobs a manager has, is telling the truth. And by kind of being her manager for such a long time, it taught me how to be a better manager, because we started off in this very, not managing manager relationship. So it was easy for me to be honest, because I thought I was being fired anyway. So
Irving Azoff, mega manager, said, regarding management, said, I don't have contracts with any of my clients. They don't want to be associated with me, and they don't have to. I know a lot of managers, won't take on a client unless they have something in writing. But it sounds like your relationship is more a relationship than, a business relationship.
yeah, I don't have contracts with any of my clients for the same reason. I don't, because the thing about contracts are, they're only good when you have a problem, right? You only need them when you have a problem, and I don't want to work for anyone that doesn't want me to work for them, and
But
I've been doing this for a long time, and
But that's atypical.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the relationship you have with your clients is unique.
Yeah.
Because you're saying, if you don't want to be with me, I don't want to be with you then.
Yeah, because I've seen other people. I've seen other people, go through court and artists' careers being stalled, and in the end, it's just about, money, and usually not a lot of money anyway. By the time you pay the lawyers and everything, and all that time, I'd rather just be done.
I mean, there's the classic story of Bruce Springsteen. He had a falling out with his original manager, and he just went into hiding for a couple of years and wrote out the term of the contract until he was free and clear, and then he started all over again.
Yeah.
I don't think there's many artists that could do that or willing to do that, but
it's the business is so different now. You used to have the luxury of going away. I think it's really tough now because, it's not. That was the go away so they miss you. Go away. You were oversaturated. That was the big thing. Like, are they oversaturated? Now there's no. 24/7 is not oversaturated. Like, that's, if you go away for a minute, people freak out. It's hard. I think it's tough. I think artists. The nice thing about being an artist. I work for Johnny Rotten from Hill. For. Famous punk guy, and
Wow.
he used to come to the record company, and one time his girlfriend came with him, and she was naked in a raincoat. She had a see-through and she comes to the office. She's sitting on my, couch, and the press are coming in. There's basically a naked girl in the office, and Johnny, and it just was to me is the allure, right? Or there was they were always on the stage in a way, because you looked up at them, right? Like AC/DC, the guys are probably 5'4", but I still when they would walk in the room with me, to me they were giants, they're because they were rock stars, and Johnny was just like this ghost almost, or this legend. And it was sexy to me, and they got to disappear, and they also got to be regular guys. Like when there was the Johnny. He was always insane, but when he was on, and when he was off, he was gone. And I think now, kids, but artists are like, I'm having breakfast, I'm having scrambled eggs. Like, who the cares? You could be writing a song right now. Instead, you're tweeting it, or you're going to the clubs. My artist Nikki Vianna, she's a big pop artist on Atlantic, and it's you got to get her to. She's in the studio working. Well, she hasn't tweeted in 17 minutes. It's maybe she has nothing to say, And I think that you do lose. I don't listen. That is something that is the new music, and all you guys are artists, and it's how do you. how do you, I don't know, I don't have an answer for that, but I liked the fact that you got to go away, that Bruce could go away. And sometimes maybe if you go away, your great record is about to be made because you have time for introspection instead of feeling like, oh, I got to do another song. It's like, you know, I had this incredible meal with Bill Withers. You guys don't know who Bill Withers is, right? Lean on Me, and, you know, Grandma's Hands, and these, like, the greatest American song, one of the greatest American songwriters of all time. And Bill was signed to Elektra Records, and Sylvia had flown Bill in to New York, and she had put him in the studio with Keith Sweat and Johnny Gill, and all these guys at the time were doing New Jack Swing. It was called the genre, the form of R&B. Christopher Williams, who was a great New Jack swing guy. And there were, you know, guys out of New York mostly, or Boston. And so Sylvia brought Bill Withers in. Of course, these guys are like, work with Bill Withers is going to be the most incredible thing in the world. And so Bill's going, you know, to these, you know, recording sessions with these young guys, and they're writing about, you know, all night long and all this stuff. And Bill, you know, so Sylvia calls me and says, you know, I'm having dinner with Bill Withers and I'm running late. Can you go to the restaurant, again, before cell phones, and, you know, go to the restaurant and sit with him till I get there? And I'm like, scared. Like, what am I going to say to Bill Withers, you know? So I go to the restaurant, and I get to have this conversation with Bill Withers, and he said, one of the things he said to me that stuck with me so much, he was like, you know, I really appreciate the fact I have 2 young kids, you know, I got to make money. This is before sync was like how it is now, and how things were a little bit different. Like, it was a little bit, you know, he wasn't probably making the money he's making right now on his repertoire. And he said, you know, what I don't want to do, if I would never release a song that was not as good as those songs. And sometimes I think God only gave me those 5 bullets or whatever, however many songs it was. He said, you know, I just don't, the songs I'm writing, I'd be embarrassed to have them share the same room as those other songs. I'm so proud of those songs. So, you know, tell Sylvia that I appreciate the fact that she's trying to, like, bring me into this, you know, new world, but it's just not for me, you know. You know, that's why Bill Withers is Bill Withers, and because I think that, you know, he had also had so much self-pride and appreciation for his own talent that he didn't join the hamster wheel. And I think it's really hard now to not be on the wheel, you know, because artists, labels are like, we don't have to put out albums anymore, you put out songs, and, oh, that's a good song, we'll just put it out and see what happens, you know. And I think it's a more difficult time to be an artist, actually. I mean, there's ways that you have more access to your fans, and there's, you know, technology. You can, you know, you used to have money to go in the studio. You know, you need a lot of money, and you know, great records were made because it kept mediocre artists out, because no one wanted to pay for, you know, artists that weren't good enough. And now with all that technology, there's just so much music, but it demands the artist kind of, you know, I don't know.
Well, Cyndi's a very unique person. I mean, with her Broadway shows,
Yeah.
and her amazing vocal range and her songwriting, and her brain operates very differently because she's an artist. So she has this other organization that she started with you.
Yeah, so Cyndi, you know, I mean, the thing that's great about Cyndi, and one of the things that she's been smart about, is she always has, she's always been very philanthropic, but she's always been a multimedia artist. But one of the things that she's done from before it was popular was she was always a big gay advocate. You know, Cyndi's very big in fashion, and you know, a lot of her, like, she always calls it like her armor, like makeup for her and her hair makes her brave, you know. She said, you know, I did that because it made me feel brave. Like, I knew what was inside of me, and how I could go on stage and stand in front of all these people. It was like my war paint, you know. And she said that it was not for the gay men, mostly, that she worked with. She wouldn't have, you know, been able to put on her mask. Like, those were her, like, soldiers who helped dress her up, and like, so she could go out to, you know, conquer. And so in the 80s, when AIDS was happening, they didn't even know what it was. You know, Cyndi was going to you know, people were thinking you could, you know, touch somebody, or you can be in the same room with somebody and catch AIDS. And Cyndi was going to the hospitals and doing fundraisers before it was popular. Like, you know, when Ronald Reagan, our president, wouldn't even say the word AIDS when it was ravaging our country. And Cyndi was one of the first artists really to stand up for the people who were dying from AIDS. So she's been a very big advocate, and you know, she had this song called True Colors, which wasn't meant to be a gay anthem, and you know, she's performed it one year at a game event, I guess, and it just became like this viral thing, you know, word of mouth, that the community took it as their anthem. So she's taken that responsibility to heart, and still we have I guess about 10 years ago, Cyndi and I started a foundation called the True Colors Fund, and what we do is we help homeless LGBTQ kids, because 60% of all homeless kids between 12 and 24 are gay, and they're, while only 6% of the population identify at that age LGBTQ. So 6% identify, 40% are in the streets because their family kicked them out for being gay. So we started a foundation where we help homeless gay kids become unhomeless, you know, become basically finish their parents' jobs. So we help. We have a network, and we put them in housing and help them get, you know, whatever their dreams are, whatever their adult dreams are, whether it be creative or college, or we help, you know, basically give them a path to independence.
Both you and Cyndi are also active in another organization, and I wanted to show it on the
You know,
big
all of
screen.
you girls in here who are artists, so she's in music. There was a study done in, what it was, I think it was 2000, this is what part I got cheap. There was a study done over a course of 6 years. I think it was 2000, or was it 4 years? Like 2013 and 2017. And basically, it was a study done about both race and you know, male-female ratios to music, and the study was most like with minorities. I hate saying that, minorities, but with Black, Latinos, the number's pretty fair, because obviously hip hop runs the music business, and so there's a lot of Black and or non-white people that make music in this study. But what the takeaway from this study that was so crazy was that women have no number, basically. A female has never been nominated for Producer of the Year ever in the Grammys. Only of all the 600 songs that were the hits in those, so the most successful 100 songs in those 6 years, only 12% were female songwriters. Only 2% were producers, either engineers, producers, mixers, players, was under 2%. Alicia Keys, Jody Gerson, who's the head of publishing for Universal Music, Sam Kirby, who's one of the head of William Morris, one of the senior agents, decided to start She Is the Music. And She Is the Music, one of the main things they do is we created a database where female artists can register, so that if you're Alicia Keys and you're going on tour, instead of, you know, like I was telling the story to Sam, like I was looking for a female drummer for Cyndi last summer. She wanted to go out with mostly a female band, and we had such a hard time finding female drummers. Knowing everyone who I've known, I've been doing this for 30-something years, I found 6 drummers that we had auditioned. I should have had 60. You know, if it was dudes, we'd be drowning in drummers. So so She Is the Music started mostly for creators to join a database. So you can say, okay, here's what I do, here's my name, here's where I live, and this is my areas of expertise. So that if I'm looking for a drummer, I can go to sheisthemusic.org and say female drummers. And then all the drummers come up and their repertoires, and you can be a brand new artist or you could be a seasoned artist. Cyndi's a member, Alicia Keys is a member, you know, Florence and the Machine, I mean, Ariana Grande's a member. So the commitment is, as women, we help. We're not anti-dudes. We just try to make sure that women are in the room also, or they get considered. So I'm on the executive committee, and my job is to bring other women in the business. So I have friends at Spotify, and I have friends at different labels, and make sure that they're all looking out for their, looking out for the women in their companies, but also bringing opportunity to women. I produce a concert every year for Cyndi for the True Colors Fund that we raise money for the kids, and we have it once a year. And like last year, Pink did it, and Lou Reed is. Like we have had different artists, do it. But we've never had a female guitar tech, and we've never had a female front of house mixer. So this year, She Is a Music is going to work with me to produce the event. So we have women in non-traditional female roles to give them something on their resume. It's not like we're not going to have guys there, and you know, we're inclusive, we're not exclusive, but it's just about strengthening the women in the business. And you know, I think, you know, when I started in the business, most women were publicists. Very rarely did you see an A&R person, or, you know, we did marketing. You know, we didn't have, and we never ran the companies. And I think what's great now is you look at the business, and Sylvia Rhone, you know, runs Epic, and Julie Greenwald runs Atlantic, and you know, Jodie's running Universal Music, and all these women have positions of power. So I don't think women coming up in the business, either creators or people like me who are the suits in the business, the women will have the same kind of problems, because young men are growing up in the business with women as bosses, and there's a different tone in the industry now, and it's a great time for women in the business. It's not so great for white straight guys right now in the business, but they've had their run, so you know, it's a good time for women. And I think if all of you guys, you know, it's called sheisamusic.org. You can go on tonight and you can put your name in, and you'll probably get some work, you know. And they're also doing songwriting camps if you're a songwriter. So all the different publishers are promising to do unsigned and new artists songwriting camps, and you'll work with like veterans, and they're going to have like 12 a year. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So you know how like some people identify as women and they may have not been born as women. So can those people join?
100%. We, you know, transgender women. We actually there's a label called Disc Women, out of Brooklyn. They're run by all female. They do dance music, because again, another space where there's not a lot of females is in electronic music. You know, it's mostly guys, you know, DJs, and these women are only booking female DJs, and the woman who runs it is trans. We don't. Yeah, 100%. They are girls too, of course.
So to join the website again is
sheisamusic.org, and it says I think it says join the creator. I think it's called, like, and you just honestly just put your name in, and that's it. And then you'll be invited to events like this in the industry. Like, there'll be panels, and you know, there's a lot of things going on in New York. As long as you can get yourself to the city, there's lots. You know, the record companies are going to have mixers at night for the kids to come ask questions and meet people. And
so Cyndi is a interesting artist, because she's one of the few who's transitioned from just being a pop musician, successful Broadway.
yeah, a lot of fun.
I mean, that had to be an interesting road.
You know, you know, I think, you know, when it gets harder when you get older. You know, it's just not, you know, I mean, your fans don't go to shows as much, and it's a little different for guys for whatever reason. You know, Bruce obviously still does arena tours and stuff like that, but you know, Cyndi has always kind of, even in the beginning, because she was such a visual artist, like videos were really important to her before they were important to most artists. You know, that's why she was such a big deal on MTV, because she actually, you know, when she would make records, she would, in her mind, be making a video before even. Steve and I were having this conversation when, you know, there was like a bidding war for Cyndi, and he was at a label that was looking to sign her when she was a new artist, and her thing was, I want a commitment of 2 videos, and they were like, no, we're not going to commit to 2 videos, you know. But that was part of her deal. Like, if you're going to sign me, I get to make lots of videos. And then she went on to, you know, had a recurring role on Mad About You, and she's an actress, and she's done film, and you know, she's actually not a very big Broadway fan. She likes, you know, and then Harvey Fierstein called and said, you know, I'm doing this Broadway show, and she said no. You know, he said, well, can I finish telling you the story? There's a great movie called Kinky Boots, because there's a little indie film about these 2 men who on paper look completely different. One's white, one's privileged and straight, and one's black and gay and poor, and underneath it they're the same exact guy struggling for the same stuff, and together they come together and save a factory. And by the way, there's lots of great shoes in it. And so she's like, shoes, great. So she watched the movie, and both of us were ignorant, like, hey, so it's a Broadway show, so you write some songs. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And so we kind of went into this, again, I guess like my career, like ignorant about how big this task was and how important it was. And I was one of the producers of the show, and it was so much fun. And Billy Porter, who you guys may know, who's on Pose right now, was our original Lola, and this guy Stark Sands was the original Charlie. And we went from sitting around a table reading scenes and Cyndi writing songs about the most beautiful thing in the world, which are shoes, to 2 years later we're on Broadway and she won Tony. She was the first woman to ever win the composer Tony by herself. I mean, there's women have won with a guy, like so and so and so and so, but Cyndi won on her own, and it kind of turned everything around because people know her about her great voice and her character and her wrestling and stuff like that, but people never really appreciated what a great songwriter she was. And it took that show before she really started getting recognized as a great songwriter. And that was in 2013, and her first album came out in 1983. So it took a while, but turned things around for her. And she's working on a new Broadway show, the movie Working Girl, if you guys have seen that movie. It's the musical of the movie Working Girl. So she's still talking about women issues and the glass ceiling and all that kind of stuff. So,
anything else she's doing besides Broadway?
We have a TV show where you're going to see. I can't talk about it too much, but she's going to be doing a sitcom with a couple other great veteran women's, and she'll have an album out probably in 2020. We'll be on tour again. She's doing she's always working. Constantly.
Her albums of recent note have been of different genres.
Yeah.
She did a blues album.
Country, American classics, country record. She made those records because she really wanted to get in the studio, and Working Girl, and Kinky Boots took a really long time. And when you do a Broadway show, as the show develops, you'll write 3 songs, and those scenes get killed. So, and then they put a new scene in. So those 3 songs that you love so much are no longer needed because they're not moving the story forward. And they say, oh, forget that song. Here's another scene you have to write too. And Cyndi's just not great at, she's almost like a method actress when she writes music. Like, she has to be very much in the moment and remember who the characters are. It's kind of different for Broadway. When you write your own songs, you can always tell your own stories, or even if you tell other people's stories, but it's different when you're writing a song for a guy that has to feel this way and another guy that feels that way, and this guy's story is that story and this woman's story is that story. So she found it really liberating because she's like, oh, what would she think, or what would he think, and how would she tell her story? It took up a lot of her headspace. So in order for her to keep her other part of her joy alive, which is performing and singing, she decided to pay tribute to genres that kind of made her who she was. And the initial record was a blues record because she was in a Janis Joplin cover band, and they did a lot of Big Mama Thornton and a lot of the great women of the blues. And so she did a tribute record to that. And then she did a tribute record to country because she was a big Patsy Cline and kind of the golden era of country that was happening around the same time as those blues records. So it was kind of a yin and yang project. But she did that so that she could still sing and tour and be Cyndi Lauper and still then go back to work, being the other Cyndi Lauper. I think one of the great things about Cyndi, we did Celebrity Apprentice one year with our beloved president. And I have stories about that you would not believe. But so Cyndi, the reason why Cyndi did True Color, did Celebrity Apprentice was if you win, obviously you can win a lot of money for your charity. And we were like just starting True Colors Fund, and how we were raising money was like, go bowling with Cyndi Lauper. Have your tarot cards read by Cyndi Lauper. Get a vocal lesson by Cyndi Lauper. Have lunch with Cyndi Lauper. Go shopping with Cyndi Lauper. And it was getting to be this thing, like we're doing all these little gigs to make like 10 grand here and 20 grand here and 50 grand here. And it was just like this huge amount of work. And one of the people that worked for Mark Burnett, who's the producer of the Apprentice, knew about, Mark actually would give us money for True Colors every year. And we knew Mark from some other iteration. So Mark called and said, you guys struggle to keep the foundation up and going, and you're doing really good work. Why don't you come do Celebrity Apprentice? You could win $1 million. And I said, there's no way she's doing a Celebrity Apprentice. She'd be horrible. And he's like, have you ever seen Celebrity Apprentice? And I'm like, no, I haven't really actually sat through a whole episode. So he sent me the DVDs, because that's what we did back in those days. And she did it because she wanted to help people. And so she did Apprentice. And she failed at it, but she tried.
All right. So I want to open it up with some questions, that, not from me, but from some of the students here. And one I found interesting from Jade. I want to know, has there ever been an artist that you passed on that went on to become a huge sensation?
No.
Well, then the second part of the question is not necessarily, it's did you regret it? So.
Oh, never happened.
Let's see, I guess it's Gadiel. That's right. Since the 80s was a time where Cyndi Lauper was known all around because of her hit Time After Time, amongst others. Was there any rivalries or friendly competition between her and her colleagues? Mentioning some other female artists.
I mean, I think, the whole Madonna thing was kind of, they're both New York City scene girls, and there was always like, are you Team Cyndi or Team Madonna? Like you had to choose, kind of back in, like in those days. So it wasn't like those two ladies that we don't like each other. It was kind of like this. It was just like this thing that was created by the media. I don't think they ever even met, which is really weird, ever. And Cyndi is not a Madonna hater or anything like that. There was a smaller, there was definitely so much airtime, right? There's only so much video time on MTV. There's only so many times, like, you could be on Letterman. So there was harder opportunity. So you had to definitely be, fight for your spots, where now, because of streaming, a playlist is 600,000 million songs, So I think there's less competitiveness because, well, I mean, artists are competitive, but there's less, obvious competitiveness, I think, now, because there's more bandwidth, I guess. I don't know. But I don't think she ever felt competitive.
Samantha asks, the statement is that a good personal manager is a patient person. Is it generally easy to stay patient when you're managing a popular artist with a busy schedule?
No. No, it's a really hard job, because you don't, as a manager, you really don't have a life. Like, I haven't had a day off in years. Like, you literally, it's not like I have friends like, oh, it was great, I unplugged for a week. Oh, that's, when you manage somebody, hey, I'm taking off for a week. It's not how it works. It's just not how it works. You don't have weekends off, nights off, nothing, because it's, artists are, it's almost like having a kid, but not, like you're responsible. Because, like, we work at a bank, right? The bank closes and nothing else happens until the next day. When you're an artist, there's tours at night, they're in the studio at night, they have an idea at night. It's just like, it's not the same, right? You can't say, okay, don't call me till Monday. I mean, I say that to Cyndi, she says it to me plenty of times, like, don't call me for a week, I can't talk. And then she's like, oh, did you see that thing in the like? I thought we weren't talking for a week. But it's not what a good manager is. You're around whenever they need you, and you don't stop, because that's not how artists. They don't become artists on Tuesday. Like, if you're selling ice cream, you go home and you stop selling ice cream. But if you're an artist, you're always creating, or I'm not sure I answered your question, but. But yes, trust, and so you can, trust is the most important thing, I think.
Karamo asks, what's the craziest request that you ever got from Cyndi, and were you able to do it?
She decided one time to do a gay pride event, like last minute, and she said, I want to float. Now, it's like the Tuesday before the pride, which is Sunday, and I'm like, where am I going to find out? As a matter of fact, it's in Weehawken, New Jersey. Who knew? It was before Google, but, I'm like, Yellow Pages, floats, and someone's like, no, I think I saw a float factory in Weehawken. And I'm like, what? So we, took a subway and got to Weehawken, and they're like, you can't get a float. I'm like, how about that one? And what if you put that? And, we went there, and Cyndi and I built a float in like 48 hours. It was pretty ugly, but we did it.
Let's see. how do you deal with the, this is from Julian, how do you deal with the unpredictable nature of being an artist manager? Was this part of the job that was especially hard for you to deal with at first, or were you always able to deal with it?
I mean, some days, like, we're human, you know, like some days it sucks and you know, you wish you could, and something you're really good at and you're really bad at it, and some days, you know, you're awesome. I mean, mostly I feel like I'm, you know, I don't have a lot of moments of weakness, but sometimes you don't respond in a calm way. But if you've been through enough battles together, you know, it's like, you know, Cyndi and I are almost like sisters now, you know. So she you know, she appreciates, and I have this guy Ben who's this super cool, calm guy, and he's like, it's all good. No matter what happens, he's like, it's fine, it's all good. Tomorrow, you know, we're going to overcome, we're going to get there. I'm not worried about any of that. And so it takes both sides. But yeah, it's hard work being a manager. It's definitely, that's the hard part of it, that you don't really, sometimes you need to turn off and you really can't, you know.
Jade posts this question: when you were first entering this male-dominated industry, did it occur to you your gender could be a factor in being underestimated and not taken seriously, or did you just go about doing your business without paying any mind to it?
It never really entered my mind. Like, I didn't say, oh, you know, I mean, I think it was kind of, in a way, it was kind of not like, it was kind of sexy being one of the few female managers. There were so few of us. I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. It was never like, oh, you can't do that. And I never thought I couldn't do anything. And, you know, all the men that I worked with over the years, I never had, you know, I was talking to, you know, Steve about this on the way here, like, I never had a Me Too moment. You know, the 80s were a very different time in the business. You know, it was way looser. And, you know, it was in the 80s, so there was a lot more drinking and drugs and things like that. I mean, you know, I always had this, you know, there was a lot of drugs in the 80s, the record companies during the day. I mean, it was nuts, you know. And, you know, it was, again, we were all in it for 24/7. So, you know, people dated people. I didn't know any Harvey Weinsteins. You know, there was... you know, we were marginalized a little bit to the press department, but I always felt like I always got listened to. I never had, you know, I always got promotions. I didn't ever consider my gender. Like, I didn't make that part of who I, like, oh, I'm a girl and I want to do this. That's not, I just wasn't part of how I thought, you know. And again, like I was saying earlier, I think it's a great time for women because there are more women bosses. Because of Time's Up, the industry, whether they want to or not, are giving women more titles and you know, I left the labels 10 years ago, so or more than that, 15 years. I don't know how many years ago. I left the label system a long time ago, and there were no women bosses. And I think because of Time's Up and Me Too and all these things, the industry's responding because they have to, not because they want to. So good for women, you know. That's, you know, again, you know. I thought the music business is cool because, like, to be in the music business and be able to represent artists, all of us were so lucky that I didn't really meet any jerks. Like, we were all cool because we had these amazing jobs and we got to work for artists. Like, how crazy is this? And we all felt that way. So there wasn't any bad, you know, I never really met any bad people in all these years.
But along the way, surely there were some men who hit on you or made inappropriate remarks.
Yeah, there was, you know, there was always that. I mean, like I said, especially in the 80s, there was, you know, but it was never like, you need to sleep with me or you're getting fired. You know, it was, you know, there was people hit on you and you just walk away, you know. It wasn't like, oh, the next day you didn't have your job. That never happened to me, you know. And sometimes they were your peers. They weren't your, I don't think I ever got hit on by a boss. But, you know, you would have other men in your company, you know, asking you out, but it wasn't, I never felt threatened or anything like that, you know. And maybe I was lucky. I mean, no, I know a lot of women who have, so I was just fortunate.
Crystal references a story that you and Cyndi, when you were working with her, that you both were you approached two teens singing outside a gig, and then you had them sing with her in concert the next day.
That was last summer, yeah.
Did you think they'd become a potential client or artist in the future, or?
No, I mean, you know, we were in, where the heck were we? You know, we always walk around. Like Cyndi is, you know, you're lucky enough to tour, and Rod doesn't do a whole lot of shows a week. You know, you have a lot of days off. We always try to, if nothing else, we eat a lot. So what can we eat in this? Oh, in this city they have the best ribs. In this city they have the best jambalaya. In this city they have the best whatever. So we always go find the best whatever. And we were going to a restaurant that someone turned us on to, and there was these two kids, and they were singing in front of the restaurant, and they were like wrecking it. And you know, I look at her and I pull my shirt up and like I have these goosebumps, and he's like maybe he's 14 or 13 and she's like maybe 16, and he has this like beat up keyboard player that sounds horrible, and she's like, you know, we should give him that keyboard. Like the keyboard we're not using. I'm like, give the kid alone. They're fine. And so, you know, we're watching them, and then, you know, we walk away with clapping, and, you know, they didn't know who Cyndi was. They're these kids, you know. So we walk away, and, you know, and she's like, they were so good. And I'm like, I know. She's like, let's get them to sing tomorrow night. And I'm like, I don't know they know who you are. So I go to these, you know, I go to their dad. I'm like, hey, you know, Cyndi Lauper. Oh, he recognizes her. I said, we're doing this gig, you know, and if you can come to sound check, and, you know, they can perform at Sin. And they're like, and so I guess he took them home because they didn't know the song. And they practiced, and they came to, and it was an arena, so it was in front of 15,000 people. And they were these little kids that like had sung in their church and had done some school performing, but they had never done like they had done, you know, family gigs, and they play in front of 15,000 people. And the little boy was like fearless, and the little girl during sound check, I was like, oof, she was not very good. And I'm like, oh, did we see this kid right? Did we were crazy last night? And so Cyndi went up to her and said something to her, because I couldn't hear her. And the little girl just all of a sudden blows, you know. And that night, you know, standing O for these two little kids. And then I guess Ellen had him on TV the next week, and the dad reached out for me, but it was never like, oh, we're gonna, you know, was never something. But I think they did get a little bit of a ride off of it. They're little. I think they're not ready for, you know, the music yet.
Nunzio asks, how do you properly handle family and personal life and managing other clients when you have a successful big artist like Cyndi?
Well, you know, I spent a lot of time. You know, we spent a lot of time away from our kids. I mean, I have one son, and Cyndi has one son, and my son's 20, and he's at the University of Miami, who wants to be in the music business. You know, my husband didn't travel for work, and Cindy's husband also stayed home with her son. He's an actor, but he had a New York City gig. So I'm sure if you added it all up, I probably missed, you know, 3 years of my son's life. Probably, you know, if I put every single day in his 18 years, you know, he was still living under my roof. I missed a lot, you know. We never missed important things. You know, they've also got to see the world. Our kids are a year apart. Cindy's son's an artist. And so our kids got to go to China. I mean, I never left New Jersey till I was 18, and my kid was in, you know, Paris, and, you know, had been to Europe, you know, 10 times before he was 11 or 12. You know, we put him on the back of the tour bus, and because they were the same age, you know, it worked out for a long time. But you do sacrifice, and the husbands, you know, whatever, get a new one. They don't like it.
Okay.
We don't worry about them at all.
Okay. Joseph wants to know, what would you tell a young local band who wants to start building a team and expand their fan base? Is finding the right personal manager a good start, or should a booking agent or business manager be the first step?
I think managers are always the best, obviously. I mean, I think, you know, the most important thing is just to be your best artist, right? I think one of the things that's so underrated is performing. You know, you see these kids who have these big hit records, and you go see them, and they're so bad. You can't even sit through 3 songs because, you know, one of the things that, you know, in the olden days was that, you know, how you got record deals was that you could sell tickets. So if you played a bar, and then you could sell that bar out, and then the bigger bar would hire you, and then another bar, then all of a sudden you got you know, you get a job in Bronx and in Queens and in Manhattan and in New Jersey, and all of a sudden you were going up, you know, up to New York State and playing, you know, Boston and playing Philly and doing all that stuff. And then, you know, or whether you came out of the South or you came out of Texas, you would garner attention because you could sell tickets. And by the time a label was ready for you, you had done a bunch of gigs, right? So that if and when you have a hit, you could deliver. And I still think now the most important, like, I think if you can't perform live, that's where you should be putting your energy, you know? You know, the social media stuff, I don't, that's important, obviously, but but make it about music instead of about your scrambled eggs, like put music out on SoundCloud. Look at all these, hip hop, you look at hip hop kids, these kids haven't come from nothing, and they just go to open mic nights, and they do these mix show tapes, and they just hustle, and they put teams around them, but a lot of it's they play. And then, and they meet other people, and they collaborate, and, there's a real sense of community, and I think that's why, whether the industry changes, they figured it out, even it's, I don't know, that's...
So going along with that, Jaylene's question was, would you prefer to sign an artist that is both creative and has great stage presence, or does stage presence, performing live, is not a factor in your consideration? And how do you go around working an artist that doesn't have great stage presence but can sing live?
I mean, listen, Mariah Carey, is watching her perform live for 2 hours is one of the more painful experiences you can have. Because she doesn't know how to dance. Like Whitney Houston was horrible live. Like terrible. I was Whitney Houston's publicist for a summer. Like she just never figured it out. She was never comfortable. Sang her ass off. Like Mariah Carey, one of the great singers of all time, not a great performer. So it's not like you have, like my thing is that's what I love. Like I love the live thing more than I love the radio star. Certainly Mariah Carey's killing it. She's playing Vegas, and you put dancers around you, and you can have production. So even if you're not amazing live, you can do a great show. My thing is, I'd rather have both. But then there's some artists who don't want to perform or don't want to play live, and they just want to be singers, and that's a career too. It's just different, I don't think there's a one answer to that, really.
Jacqueline asks, what's the one aspect of being a personal manager that you found particularly difficult?
Listen, I got the greatest job ever. Like I really do. I've got to see the world. I've got to, I get to watch people play music. I get to watch people write music. I get to be in the studio. I think to me, it's like, why am I even here? Like I feel like I'm an interloper, And to me, that's such a precious gift that, most artists are really bad business people because they just, not all of them, because you're so busy being creative that, do you really want to spend the time? Like, Cyndi and I had these arguments sometimes because she'll want to do something. I'm like, this is something stupid. Like she had these lockers full of crap, right? We're looking for stuff for the Smithsonian. And she wants to go to every locker, there's 10 of them across, the city, and, dig through the locker. I'm like, or we could send your assistant with a camera. Like, hey, and you don't have to, you're a creative. You could be writing, you could go in the studio and write a song today. Or you could spend the day doing something that anyone could do. So as an artist, you're doing something that none of us can do. Finding a manager is easy. Finding someone that could book shows is easy. Finding a decent lawyer, there's more lawyers than there are artists. To be an artist, that's what you should be worried about. And so if you can find somebody that while your head is in the creative, that's saying, okay, and not that you shouldn't be part of it, you're the quarterback, Find someone that has a vision for you, that can take the meetings, that can get you heard, that can get you bookings, that can be the one online saying, oh my God, there's there's this little festival up in upstate New York, and they're looking for unsigned bands. Like, why aren't we doing that? Or get your music to a band you like to see if they're looking for support. It doesn't have to be, an arena act. It could be someone that you just dig that's playing in your local town that people go see and jump on the stage with them and that kind of stuff.
While I'm just reading these questions, are there any questions that have just come to light that you'd like to ask? Go ahead.
I have a question. So I've been very fortunate, to be in a band in college, and we performed a lot without a manager at one point, and it was we didn't have direction. And now, fortunately, we do have a manager who's helping us out. But I've noticed that some certain times around the year, it gets hard to bring people out to shows. Mm-hmm. Do you find for yourself when you're scheduling these shows to maybe stay away from the winter or focus more on the summertime?
There's definitely, it depends. It doesn't, summertime is everyone's out, right? And people don't have a finite amount of dollars. I don't know. I think college kids, like, school year is great, and college campuses are great. I don't think there's a bad time. Christmas, holidays, you stay away from that stuff when people aren't. But that's really what we stay away from. In the big business, people stay away from awards ceremony because you want to be able to do Jingle Ball, you want to be able to do the Grammys or stuff like that. So people black out late January, early February, so that they can be available for those things. But I think anytime you can play, you play. Even if you play in front of 30 people, who cares? Like, maybe you'll turn one person, or you'll learn something about your performance that night. As long as you keep getting them, and
Anyone else have a question? Well, experts. I'll go back to this then.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. What is the agent and agency that Cyndi uses, and what's your relationship with it?
Well, Cyndi has a couple different agents. So she's with ICM in ex-US for touring. She's with ICM for her theatrical, so her agent there helps her with the Broadway stuff. She's with AGI for domestic touring, Artist Group International. She's with CAA for movies and TV. So she's a little bit all over the place, which is it's a bit unusual, but not so much from her era. People did that. They would go with an agent versus an agency. Agencies kind of now make you do all or nothing, like Nikki's with CAA for everything. And Ben's with a little tiny rock agency out of Brooklyn that has like 6 acts. So.
In all transparency, we should mention that one of her agents has been a former guest here.
Oh, Marsha Vlasic is Cyndi's domestic agent, and she's a ball buster. She's great.
You guys know.
She's a little scared version. I'm still, But my job is so what I do is I call Marsha, and I'll say, okay, Cyndi has a new album coming out, or she doesn't. Or, we're looking to go out. She has 3 months that we want to go out. Marsha's agency also represents Rod Stewart. So Rod was looking for support, and, she called and said, hey, do you want me to approach Rod about Cyndi? And we're like, yeah, great. So that, but mostly my job is to tell them when she should go find shows, and they bring me offers. And they have these things called privates where you go play for like AT&T's sales division or whatever these things are called, and they're like corporate events. They pay a lot of money, and so most of them, when those things happen, they'll call and say, oh, Tiffany, for example, this called me yesterday and said, Tiffany is announcing this new line. They want Cyndi to be a brand ambassador, but she would have to do these 6 events over the course of the year. Of course, Cyndi didn't like the jewelry, so we're not doing it, but those kind of things come from the agency too. But your job is to keep them aware of the artist's progress or what they're doing and when they're available. And if something good happens, like Nikki, because she's a new artist, every week when Nikki has a new song out and she got playlisted on New Music Friday, her song got picked last week. And so of course you go, hey, CAA, great news, the song got playlisted at Spotify, New Music Friday, which is the big playlist. Everybody's, the industry, that's like the kind of a talisman of good things to come. So your job is to keep everybody excited and engaged, and so that when they're on the phone, they have 600 acts, they're remembering to talk about Nikki,
Christian wanted to know, what are some of the characteristics of a good or bad manager that you've witnessed through your career?
One of my favorite managers is a guy that who was Teddy Pendergrass's publicist, a manager, a guy called Shep Gordon. Shep, he has a movie made by Mike Myers called The Mensch, right? So Shep made me want to be a manager because I was like, who's cooler than Shep? And the thing that was great about Shep was that he was the biggest fan of Ted's, and he also did Alice Cooper, and he had some other artists, but nobody was a bigger fan of Teddy Pendergrass than Shep. And I'd go into a room and I'm like, oh my God, he would just engage everybody and get everybody excited, so that when we left, we wanted to please Shep as much as we wanted to please Ted. And
so what made him?
Relentless in his pursuit of the long-term goal of what the artist wanted to do. They had a dream and he was going to make it happen, and didn't take no for an answer. You wanted it, you could not say no to Shep. It just was not possible, because you'd hang up the phone, he'd call you back and give you another reason why you should go back and get something done. He was just really a planner. and you know, and thorough and on it and available. If I called Shep, he had a house in Hawaii and one in, you know, whatever time I called Shep, you know, again, before cell phones, like, he'd call you back. And you were like a little tiny small speck of the team, and he called you back the same day and responded to everything you asked him. There was never a day that you had a question or something he didn't call you back. And some managers go weeks and you'd chase them, I had this, and they just wouldn't call you back, you know. So.
Along that line, Isaiah was wondering what to do if you can't afford to pay a good attorney to look at a contract between you and an artist. What would you suggest?
Well, I mean, unfortunately,
you don't have.
You should never sign anything that you don't have someone look at. You know, it's a tough one. You know, I mean, I think any manager who is, you know, really believes in your talent, you say, let's work together for 6 months and let's see how we do, and then you worry about it. You know. And lawyers, you know, there are good. I mean, the thing is, I always tell my clients, like, a lot of artists take lawyers take percentages. I think that's the worst thing you can do. You can't. I mean, you're already giving up so much to the record company, and then the manager and the agent and every partner you have takes a percentage, and then for you also to pay your attorney when it may cost you money initially to spend more money to whatever $600 on a contract or something, but over the course of your life. Lawyers never bring deals to artists. It just doesn't happen. I mean, they say they do, but it's just not. It's a fiction. So you're better off paying them by the hour, because they're not bringing in enough to make them your partners. You know, or make it really short term and do it for a year or two and then get out. You know, if you can't afford to pay an attorney.
A hypothetical question from Camilio. Are there other people in the industry that you feel could fill your shoes, and vice versa? Do you feel like there are other people in the industry who you could do a better job?
You know, listen, I think anyone could be a manager, honestly. I mean, I don't think it's not,
Really?
You know,
Anyone?
I think so. I think, you know, I mean, not anybody, but I think it's a lot. The only people that I can't replace are artists, and any person at any label can be replaced. You know, the only people that can't be replaced are the artists. Everything else, you can be taught, or somebody else behind can learn. It's not like it's just once you know how to navigate the business. But without the artists, there's no business. So, you know, I don't know. I don't think any of us are not replaceable on this side of the table, anyway.
And are there people that you see who do the job and you say, I could do better than that? Or you don't do that?
You know, it's like I don't have time for that stuff too much. You know, if people are knuckleheads, I just, you know, I don't know. I don't really think about that much. I don't put that much time. It's like I don't have enough time to hate on somebody. Really, it just doesn't. It's a waste of time, you know. I mean, there's always going to be people, and if she failed up or he failed up, or yeah, but they're there, so you know they have their job. And if you're at a label and the person is not 100% on, then you work around them, you know. I always say to all my clients, I pretend we don't have labels, because if labels do anything for us, we're grateful. If they don't do anything for us, we're still going to be making records. We're still going to go out. We're still going to get gigs. We're still going to find a way around them if they don't prioritize you. Like, you know, if a label does something for us, I'm like, hey, this is great. And sometimes you get in there, you get on top of the list, but sometimes you're not, and you can't stop. And you have to make them excited sometimes, and that sucks that you are giving them 80% of your, you know, revenue, and you have to get them excited. But that happens sometimes, and that's frustrating. But you know, they're like, you know, they're the cogs in the machine. That's, you know, if they work, great. If they don't, we put the wrench in and we do it ourselves, you know.
Question from Tyler saying, you know, you've been around for a few years at So What? Have you seen the industry from a management standpoint? What kind of changes have you noticed since you started?
Yeah, like I said, I think the difference is there's not, with the younger artists, it's not. Well, you look at people like the kid that manages Marshmallow. I mean, they're like dynamic duo. They're like these kids that create amazing. They come up with these amazing things, and they're like a team, and they're battling the world. And the kid did the concert with Fortnite, and that was their. I mean, like they just like where did they like wow. So impressive. And they're, then Scooter Brown was like another manager, like you see the stuff he does with his clients, they're so amazing. But there is this, and I think the best combinations or the best relationships are the manager and the artist are like one team. And everyone else is, support, I guess you would say, or something. And I think but you do see a lot with young managers now or young artists that they kind of go behind their manager's back, kind of not. I wouldn't even say that. It's like, oh, I'm at the label. Like, what do you mean you're up at the label? Like, I have another friend. It's like, oh, my artist is up doing, some meet and greet with some brand department. And didn't even tell me he was going. I'm like, how does that happen? Like, the label booked it right with the artist, and I think. I hate that, and that would never have happened 20 years ago. You would have gotten fired if you called the artist direct. You would have been gone. Like it was just not done ever, But again, it's because of social media. The kids are IMing each other and that kind of stuff, so they have they get this sense of familiarity, and they just forget the managers around, and it never works out for anybody,
But your client's not going to do that.
No. I wouldn't work with them. I mean, I just, I don't want to manage that. I don't want to manage a mess, I mean, at the end of the day, the artist is the boss, right? Like, your job is to represent them the best of your ability. But if they take away your power, I'm not saying your power, but you have to have. I just think the artist needs to keep with, at least in the label system. That's not necessarily for everything. They need to have. There needs to be a separation, because they can be like Jennifer Lopez, right? Nicest girl ever, and her manager's the meanest guy in the world. Because Jennifer says, I'm not doing that. Go tell him I'm not doing it. Hey, thank you. Oh, yeah, he's going to call you tomorrow. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And she's the most beloved artist in the industry. Everyone's like, oh, she's so easy to work with. And I've been in lots of things with Jennifer, and it's because she lets her manager go do his thing, And no one knows what Jennifer's thinking, not in a bad way. And she plays the good guy, and she's like, go kill that person, please. And he does, And that's the best thing, Like, you want the label to be doing everything they can for you. And if it becomes too familiar, it becomes like you become too familiar, And that kind of, I don't know. I can't explain it. I'm not explaining it well, but.
As a manager, what tools do you recommend somebody who wants to get in management use?
There's no like management, class really. You just really have to know the industry. You have to know trends. I mean, I read everything. I get up in the morning. I get up at 6 o'clock every morning, so my house is quiet, and I read up. I listen to music still. I do.
What do you read?
Billboard. The music. There's 1,000. I mean, there's a kid called Rick Estra. I read the Bulletin every day. There's Music Business Weekly or Daily. I read Forbes. I look for music stories. I just sit there and do that for a bit. Listen to music if something's coming out. On Fridays when I'm at the gym, I always listen to the different playlists that are happening, because I have an artist that's in that space now. It depends on the project, if I have something coming, when Cyndi's working on this new Broadway show, we're going to shows three times a month, going to see Broadway shows to see what is competitive, and look at we hear this lighting director's gate, let's go see that show because he's lighting that show right now, or the costume designer for that show is supposed to be great, so we go see that show. So we do a lot of research so that when we get into a room with somebody, you know what you're talking about, And the industry changes so fast. It's you have to. If I was just managing Cyndi, maybe I wouldn't have to worry about the kind of DSPs and what they're doing. But it's not. It's completely 80% of what my other artist does. So.
Well, you mentioned Billboard. Are there other websites? Are there websites?
I know. I'm having a brain freeze. But there's one that I love. Where's my phone? That I find is the most. I think it's Music Business MB. I think it's even better than Billboard. Cyndi Lauper called me. Okay, hang on.
Anyone have questions, by the way? Okay, wait till she finds the website. No.
Music Business World.
Worldwide.
Worldwide. That's one that I find, because they the most important stories are there. but I still like when I get on planes, which I'm on planes a lot. I bring the billboard, and people are like, you still read that thing? I'm like, because sometimes you just, I save and Billboard sends 4 or 5 stories a day. But music business to me feels like the one that if you don't have a lot of time, that's the one to read.
You had a question, sir?
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for coming in. Second of all, as emerging artists, artists who are just starting out and doing things, as new artists, what can we offer to managers just so that they're taken care of, and so that while we're looking for different people to add to our team, how do we take care of the other member in our team?
I mean, it's tough. Like in the beginning, a lot of times you don't make money for years. With Nikki, I've been managing for Nikki for 3 years, almost 4 years, and it's just you have to be again, it has to be the long game. You don't always make you don't make money in the beginning. Not that you don't make money. And I managed a band called Hunter Valentine for a long time. There was a really cool girl band out of Canada. They were amazing, and I loved them. I just thought they were a great band, and for a myriad of reasons it didn't happen. But they would be on tour and making money, and they all didn't have day jobs. They were a rock band. But then I wouldn't commission tours, because if I commissioned the tour, then they wouldn't be able to pay their rent or something like that. But I had the fortune of having Cyndi. You want your manager to be able to do it 24/7. But at the same time, there is that part, the beginning stages, you don't always make money. And it's not good to pay somebody, I don't think. I think they just have to work on commissions and be in it. And you shouldn't have to pay anyone to be your manager. It shouldn't be that. You're de-incentivizing them in a bit. And you don't know if they're good enough to give. I mean, I've heard of kids pay other kids money and it's like, what do you get out of it, It's not easy. I mean, you just got to keep. I mean, the most important thing is you have to make great music. Your music has to be better than everybody else's. That's all. And the rest comes, I think. You have to just spend the time making sure you're your best. You're putting your best work forward. And I think it's great that you're taking a class like this. I don't think they had classes like this years ago. So at least you understand how the business works, and you're not going into situations blind. You understand how the math of the business too. And I think that's being informed is incredible power, because then you won't get f***ed over by somebody who's trying to f*** you over, down the road, because you're gonna wait a minute, that's not how it's supposed to be,
Yeah, there are students actually in this room who have been offered management contracts by people who are saying for $1,000 a month or for $5,000 up front, and then I'll commission 20% at a certain point. From the artist's perspective, how do they say no to that? Besides just saying no, but how do you? Because there's that opportunity there.
I don't really have a good answer. I mean, I know that's another new thing that didn't happen when I started out. That just wasn't done really. That I know of. I never heard anybody. It's kind of like feast and famine. But I get it too. If you're a manager, you have to also pay your rent. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, if you think, I don't know. I don't really have a good answer. Sorry.
It sounds like a lot of money to be introduced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, lawyers, lawyers do that. They say you pay them and they get meetings. I guess if someone's got an attorney, at least. Yeah. Instead of having a manager, they're not managing you. Then they're just getting you meetings, and hire an attorney who, at least they will also be able to read your contracts if they get you one. If they can get you 10 meetings, I guess. Yeah. Then it's worth it. But if they, on a guess, I don't think it's worth it. Show me the meetings and I'll give you a check. Pay them after the meetings.
Anyone else?
No. His favorite question is, one of his favorite questions, the guy here, is how much do you need to be in love with the artist's music?
Oh, 100%, I mean, because if you can't, because it's not easy, and if you don't believe and you don't get it, and you got to go to a lot of shows, and you have to sit through so if you don't love it, how are you going to sell it? My job is a salesperson, basically, right? I'm selling everybody. That's my job. So if I don't believe these are the greatest sneakers you ever put in your feet, then how are you going to go in a room and convince anyone otherwise? So I think, you know, for me, I'd be really bad at it. I'd be bad if I didn't get it, you know. I think most managers are just looking for a money grab. Eventually, that
Catches up.
It may work for a year or two or something, but eventually it'll be what separates you, you know.
You mentioned earlier to me about a manager of a particular act, and he would stay maybe for the first song and then leave.
Yeah, like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm always like, I'm friendly with Natalie Merchant still, and I was doing actually True Colors gig, and Natalie agreed to do it for us, and so and she's like the greatest girl. She's still, you know, amazing woman, and you know, she comes to the gig, and because she doesn't want to spend any money, she's like, so you know, Cyndi was on stage, and I'm bringing Natalie. And Natalie had a little girl at the time. She's like a teenager now, but Natalie had to get back to her hotel because she had a little girl at the hotel, and you know, she had a babysitter with the kid, obviously, but she didn't want to be away from her daughter long. So I'm walking her out of the theater, and I stopped because Cyndi was doing something on stage, and then I didn't even notice I stopped, and I brought Natalie to the cab, you know, and she's like, "You still stop and watch her play after all these years?" I'm like, "Yeah, she still makes me stop." So yeah, I think it's how you have longevity together, because you know, an artist isn't gonna be somebody else. You know, if you want them to be somebody else, and you're not, you want them to be the best whatever they are, not. You should be. Ariana Grande is great. Oh, there is one already called Ariana Grande. Like, you should do what's your true self, and find someone that believes in you as much as you believe in yourself, and then, you know, all bets are off. And you will, you know. I think you will.
Question. So, with like Nikki Vianna being with Atlantic, where does your relationship stand with Atlantic? Like, do you take a step back and?
No, well, you know, the guy who signed her is a guy called Craig Kalman, and Craig is the president of Atlantic, and I was his publicist in 1994 when he was a kid who was this wonder kid who had this label called Big Beat Records, and he was this dopey kid that liked, you know, house music, and they were like, this kid's really smart, you know, get him some press, you know. So I've known Craig since he, you know, he's a little bit younger than me, not a lot, but you know, 5 years back when you're 20 and 25, it seems like, oh my God, this kid. So I've known Craig my whole life. So when I started working with Nikki, you know, what I did was, you know, and I didn't do this a lot. Like, if I didn't think the person could make somebody money and be successful, you know, Nikki's a pop artist. You know, Ben's a different kind of mass. Like, he's a rocker, and you know, he'll always be up most of his life on the road, and we're not looking for radio and that kind of stuff, and fancy videos. It's not the kind of music he makes. But I know Nikki, you know, is in that space, like the Ava Maxes and the Ariana Grandes, and you know, it has to be big videos and big records and features and all those things that cost a lot of money. So I knew I needed to get her a big deal. So, you know, I took a meeting with Craig, Sylvia, Dave Massey, who's the head of Arista, people who I'd known my whole life, but who happened, luckily, because I'm 56 and they're in their 50s and 40s, running the right? So I took 5 meetings, and I took her to, and she's a good songwriter, so I took her to Sony ATV and Cobalt, and I took her to all the chiefs, and, you know, luckily I was able to get her deals.
So you said you worked with artists like Metallica and Cheap Trick. So when you changed over to somebody like Cyndi, like, what was the major difference there? Because that's a different world.
Well, when I was working for those guys, I was their publicist, right? So, and I was Cyndi's publicist. So in a way, there's only one booker at The Tonight Show, you know. There was the album reviews editor at Rolling Stone. So, you know, it was even though they were completely different kinds of music, the job was similar. And I think, it was like, could I have managed it, like, say, AC/DC or Panic at the Disco? It's similar, it's similar work. It's the music is different, but it's not genre specific. Like with Ben, it's a completely different skill set. But I learned that from Hunter Valentine, and like, I really know the college music scene, and I know who the good bookers for developing artists, or not a bar band, because they're not quite a bar band, but a club act. It's just different kind of people. It's just like, okay, I know this guy at Paradigm's really good with little rock bands, but I wouldn't go to them with Cyndi. Like, you kind of know who does, I'm not sure I answered your
Someone
question.
else?
Well,
Yes, sir. Ma'am.
I've been approached by two separate managers. One's on the West Coast in LA, one's over here in the New York area. And I'm kind of, obviously weighing out the pros and cons right now. And the one over here wants to kind of build the foundation first before approaching making any major decisions, labels involving that kind of stuff, and just do more, build the foundation and grow from there, like step by step. And then the one on the West Coast wants to, obviously they do some foundation building and growing, but the end game is to, quicker than the other guy, pitch me to major labels, because then the labels through it can give it advance, and kind of, although it's recoupable, put forward the money to pay for like the promo, all that jazz. And they're both well connected, so it's not like those kinds of contacts are unreachable. So
right.
as a manager, what do you think is the smarter decision for an artist? Like building from the ground up and focusing on that more, and then eventually when the manager feels you're ready to go forward with that, the major steps, or get in there quicker than normal to, get in advance and then go from there?
I mean, the problem with the major, back 10 years ago, there was lots of majors, right? There was artist development departments, actual artist development departments.
You did.
And that's what I did, yeah. So, and like I was telling you about Elektra, like, okay, how are we going to get Metallica in 10 years to be an arena band? Like, what's going to be the steps to it? And there was budgets, like, okay, we're going to give Metallica $60,000 on their first record, expecting to sell 50,000, and back in those days also labels didn't have 360s. They didn't have your hand in your pocket in every single way. And then the label would try to find it, like it would go after the agencies sometimes, and they would get like 3 agencies, they would like kind of work the agencies too. And then we'd get together and come up with a plan on how to build a career artists. And the problem, and again, every label's different. So like Universal Republic, for example, is like, with the labels do these things, and the DSPs are getting pissed off because they were doing these waterfall releases where they would say, hey, we'll just set the stage, we'll just put all these records out, and eventually we'll have we're going to test the waters on you. So we're going to put it out, and then we'll put another single out, and we'll put another single out, and if you get to a certain place, we'll talk about the single we're going to work. These are all setup songs. And in a way, it was a bit of a setup, because how does it work? They put your music out, and they pretend, oh, it's great. Don't worry, we're going to develop you. We're going to set this record. We're going to set you up. But if you don't hit certain benchmarks, it's not the person that signed you or your manager, because they're saying, yeah, it's great. We're going to release these 3 singles, then we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And then they have the marketing meeting, and they put out 60 artists in 2 months. And okay, who's happening? Who's making money? Who's getting traction? Okay, forget about that one. Let's put some more money behind that one and that one and that one. So there's a bit of and a lot of the majors work that way, because they're just not making enough money. I mean, things have changed around because of DSPs, but they're like, I still think, but then money's another thing. If they're going to put you in the studio and give you money to make a better record, and going to put you with a producer that can make a better record with you, and those kind of things, that's, that's a plus, obviously. But just because you get in doesn't mean, like, your troubles begin when you get a label, almost. Because then you're fighting. And Nikki's doing great. She's getting 1 million spins a week on the new song, and that's like, Blade's like, oh, that's good. They're like, oh, fantastic. Ava Max is getting 62 million a week, and and whoever, Bruno Mars has 300 million this week. So when you're in the major label system, 1 million is really sexy to all of us in the room. But to Atlantic Records, it's like, oh, it's good. We'll give her another week, And you get to the other week, and I think Nikki has legs, or I wouldn't be managing her. She has her better songs are coming, but she did have, when I signed her, she had 3 million Instagram followers already. because she had come from a Disney thing, and then she became an influencer. It's a different thing. And she happened to be a songwriter too. So everyone's career is different. And she needed a lot of money to make the kind of record she wanted. So it wasn't like she has Pooh Bear, and she has features with A$AP Rocky and a Diplo record. Like, you can't do that unless you have money. So we had to go that route, and luckily it's working out. But I also see how there's no guarantees about anything. So it depends I don't know what kind of music you make. Nikki's a pop artist, like a straight down the middle pop record, Ben, we're with ADA, and it's like slow and steady. And in 5 years, we're going to be making lots of money. And it's fine for now because he's making a living, he's making the greatest records, and maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised, but we have a plan, and he's making enough money to and he can make a record in his home. Like, he plays every instrument, He writes his own songs. He doesn't need producers. So it just depends. Again, I'm not giving anyone any kind of good answers, and I'm sorry, because I don't know what the hell's going on.
I disagree. I want to. I told you I'd get you out of here.
But who you like better too, though. I think who do you think that you want to spend every night with? Not in a romantic way, but you're going to be together a lot, a lot. Yeah. I spend more time with Cyndi than my husband, and I actually, both of our anniversaries this year we were together. It was really nice.
Well, the one thing I hope that we all gathered, and it's really been amplified by the discussion tonight, as your career has developed, it's the people you met along the way, whether it was a Craig Kalman or Natalie Merchant. It's a networking business, and the people you meet in the beginning are the people you're still meeting and talking to Sylvia Rhone.
Yeah.
So I always say, be nice to everybody.
Yeah.
You never know, the person sitting next to you could be helping you have a career, or if you're not nice to them, it might not be so good for you. So I just say, networking is very essential to any part of the career you want to go in, whether you're a performer or behind the scenes type person. So I did tell you I'd get you out of here at a decent hour, and I appreciate you giving up your evening. So you're spending less time with your husband.
Well, I'm married for 25 years. But do join things if you can. All the women in the room join this, and if you see like there are, I think the labels are getting more, going back to more grassroots. A lot of it's they find out about stuff on SoundCloud and things like that. But if you see any kind of industry event, just go, And I know, Hot 97 is a station in New York. They always have events for, my friend's a music director there, and Titi Torres, and she's always doing stuff at SOBs, and they have new artists thing, and you can submit music, and they're looking to help people develop, and just lean in.
Well, good advice, a smart woman. Thank you for coming.